Got it. Nice to meet you. I'm just so glad that, we have you here. I looked at your resume, and when Vrinda made sure that, we'll be having this conversation, I just looked at the things that you're doing, and I envy you. The things that you're doing with it's something that I want to do myself. And I'll do it in the future. The kind of things that you're doing with aviation, with airports, and customer experience that way. It's really, really great. And I studied everything with my team here, and a few of them have questions which we'll discuss later on. But glad to have you. Really, really glad to have you here.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be here, and I know it's taken a little while for us to be able to find a slot, but yeah, so pleased that we're able to make it work.
It's great, that even if it's a bit late, the great work comes when we put, at the right time. So it's great. I want to discuss, first if we can dive in, how, and many people would want to know, that design means bettering things, improvising things. So the things that you're doing with aviation industry, with airports and all, if we can dive into it, and the kind of things that you're doing, and how did you find it? How did you find that passion, and how did you get into that? It's highly interesting. Whenever you go to airports and all, I want to improvise it. So I would want to listen.
I get it. Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, to be honest, I'm at the very, very beginning of my journey with the airport experience side of things. So that is definitely something that I watch this space on that one, because I think I'll have a lot more to say about that in 12 months' time than I probably do today. But yeah, where it started. Well, it might sound a little bit cheesy, a little bit corny, but my husband's an airline pilot. He's an airline captain, has been for the last 25 years. And it's something, I feel it's an industry that I've kind of lived and breathed. I get to hear all about what goes on behind the scenes. And I guess the reason the airport rather than the airline is particularly that interests me is that I've always had an interest in architecture and space and spatial design. I did an MA in urban planning later in my 30s. And I think what drives me towards that airport space is I'm fascinated by how people behave when they are in what some might consider to be quite an emotional environment. So airports are emotional places. We meet people there, we leave people there, but they are also highly, highly regulated. So there are a number of processing points that customers or passengers have to move through, while often quite in an interesting emotional state. They're excited maybe because they're going on holiday, or they're only airside because they're saying goodbye to somebody. But there are still a number of processes such as parking at the airport, getting public transport to the airport, checking somebody in, baggage, security, all those different processes. And what really fascinates me about that is how can the worlds of experience design, spatial design, and process design come together to enhance that experience as much as possible. So last year I was really fortunate to join an airport design course at Cranfield University, which was led by a fabulous lecturer who I now know professionally outside that as well, called Henrik Rother. And he introduced me to the airport design space. And I'm now working with him on a piece about off-site baggage, and I guess in a way how off-site baggage facilities could improve and feed into the passenger experience. So as I say, at the moment, I'm a I'm quite an early starter in this industry, but as I say, come back in about 12 months time, and I hope there'll be something a lot more concrete to talk about. But it's really, really exciting. It's my favorite thing. Definitely airport planning. It's an airport design.
It's envious. Do you? I always had this question in mind. Do you think that, when people go to like train stations or anything else, do you think people are more anxious when they are in airports? Is there more anxiety if you found out about that?
I think there are. I think there's something about going into an airport and going through those processes that just sparks a little bit of anxiety in people. When is it when you go through security and it's all so regulated and you've got all these uniformed people standing around and you know that they're absolutely fine, but what if you forget to take a watch off, or what if you forget to take a ring off or a necklace off, and then you beep, as you go through the security, and then then there's a little bit of, you don't get that really when you're traveling. For the most part, you might do if you going on the Euro through the tunnel, for example, the Channel Tunnel. But generally, when you're getting on a train, you turn up and you get on the train. And sort of airports, there is this. It's a really interesting, I think, juxtaposition of different emotions and processes. I do think, however, in the next 5 to 10 years, if not before, we are going to start seeing much more seamless use of biometrics. We already are at, border control, for example. We're starting to see the use of biometrics to make that touchless passenger experience. It's just a case of pushing a passport in, looking at a screen, and then moving through. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see that at security soon too, where we have literally what we call a walkthrough experience. But it is a fascinating place to be involved in, and right down to wayfinding as well, and how people read signs, how they get to different parts of the airport, and how they move through from before they get to the airport. So the whole passenger experience doesn't start when you walk in the airport door. It starts much before that, much further before that. So there's lots to get stuck into in that realm, definitely.
All right. Yeah, I always feel anxious when I have to take a flight. I think a part of it is because maybe it's the waiting time. Of course, the process with new enhancements like web check-in, we don't have to take a boarding pass. We can just show it on our phone to security people and all. Some of anxiety has gone away. We don't have to be in queues and do that. Mm-hmm. However, it's the anxiety maybe comes from a longer waiting period time, or at the same time that the air tickets used to be very costly, and we used to be like, okay, let's not miss the plane, if we are at the right area or not. So if you're going to be solving that, I guess, in coming times.
Well, that would be great, wouldn't it? If I could just solve that. I mean, the thing is, in airports, so there are just so many different moving parts. It's, and you've got this kind of, again, use the word again, juxtaposition, where the customer, it's an interesting scenario really, because you have the customer is not actually the customer of the airport. They're the customer of the airline, if you think about it. And the airport is their port of entry, or port of exit, of course, to get in the airplane. And so there is this interesting dynamic between airlines and airports, because the airline, quite rightly, excuse me, wants you at the gate, because they don't want to be late, because if they miss their slot, that leads into all sorts of problems and delays. But the airport wants you there to maximize what we call non-aeronautical revenue. So they want the customer, the passenger, in the airport, in those retail, restaurant, money-making areas as long as possible. So that's often when you're at an airport, you won't see the gate for your flight on the screen until pretty late on. Enough time to get everybody to the gate. Well, supposedly, there's always one or two stragglers. But for the most part, it's pretty late, because the airport want you in those money-making areas, because that's where they make their money. The only other place really they make their money from, their second source of income, is what we call landing fees, so aeronautical revenue. So it's really important to them that they provide a good experience and provide a nice spatial environment for people to be in and want to spend time in.
It's a great insight that the customer is the customer of the airport. Yeah, never thought about it like that. I always thought that I'm going in a flight and I'm their customers, but
no, it's the airport.
have
That's right. Like they're the customer of the airline, but the airport is the route to that. They're the port to that. They have to pass through that. And some airports, of course, do it much better than others. I mean, Singapore is well known for being, spatially absolutely beautiful and providing an exceptional customer experience. I recently traveled to Vancouver, YVR, and I know the airport fairly well. I've traveled through it a number of times. And again, it's one of those airports that really, for both departing and arriving passengers, actually has a wonderful experience. It's very set in its kind of surroundings. It brings the outdoor in, lots of light space. It's quite a calming atmosphere, actually, sort of running water, waterfalls. And it is, and I think it's one of the airports that actually makes it nearly as nice for arriving passengers as they do for departing. Because usually for arriving passengers, you're kind of, kicked out into a fairly drab suitcase, into the arrival hall, and that's it. But you actually do get to walk through some of these lovely spatial, beautiful areas.
Nice. How do you get that drive to build for the end customer, and then go into that and make great things for them, make things quite easier for them, or easily accessible, or maybe delight them. How do you get that drive? It may be from your background in design, and a lot of work that's been done in design, because
yeah, you know what, I think the drive's inherent, and I know that sounds maybe a little unbelievable, but I think it is. I do agree to you to some extent. I'm quite envious of my role as well, and I really, really love what I do. So every type of client that I work with, whether it be an e-commerce client or a client in manufacturing, I work right across the board. The view is that what we're doing is we're making the customer or the user's life easier. And those customers, obviously, depending on the industry, and it could be I'm working with a startup, we're just starting from the very, very scratch. I always sort of drill into them as my role as a UX mentor, because I mentor startups as well, is if you make the customer's life easier and more enjoyable, then you will reap the rewards. That's without a shadow of a doubt. But don't do it based on assumptions. And I think that's one of what drives me is data. It just sounds a little odd, I know, but it's benchmarking, it's data, it's understanding who they are, those customers are, what they really want from you, and how you can just do that one thing a little bit different or a little bit better to enable them to keep coming back. Because we all know that it's cheaper or more efficient to it's more expensive to onboard than it is to retain customers. So I guess in a way, it's what drives me actually is probably it's working with those startups, because they're at the very beginning of that journey. And I work as a mentor at Northumbria University in Newcastle, and I'm very lucky to have worked with, I don't know how many startups there. And they're the ones actually who keep me driven, because they're the ones who I know they're going to be around in 12 months' time if they get this right, or they're not. And that's, I think, what keeps me going. And then obviously that scales up depending on the type of organization I'm working with. But working with those really small micro businesses and helping them get it right from day one is a real driver for me.
Nice. We work with lots of startups as well. A lot of our work is with serial entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs who are just coming up with the idea that they think would shake up a particular industry. So we get to know after some time if the idea is perfect or not. We try to change the ideas, if it's a really product market fit, or it might sound really, really cool. You might be a really, really great programmer, but if the market is not ready or if market is not there, it's not going to succeed. So we sometimes try to find out if the product is going to succeed. How do you know, when you work with these startups, how do you get to know that is the product going to be successful? If there is a market drive for it, do you get to know while you're working on it?
That in a way, I suppose you have a feeling. You kind of know this is going to work or this is going to be more of a struggle. And there's various reasons for that. Again, I think
Right.
it's that willingness from the entrepreneur to, for example, look at competitors.
Founders matter a lot. Founders
Yes.
matter a lot.
Yes. And are they willing to look at the market? Because you know what, I've worked with some startups, and it's kind of right. I think we need to do a competitive analysis, and it's head in the sand. Absolutely, I don't want to know. What do you mean competitors? Oh, what if they're doing something better than me? And you know what? Actually, if you've got competitors, that's a really great thing, because that means there is a market. So
exactly.
That market might already be served, but there is an opportunity for you to really take a deep dive into what they're doing and how much they're charging and what the founder's expertise is in this particular realm that they're wanting to work in. I think having competitors is a great thing, because it does give you some intelligence that somebody who's not willing to look into that, because there's very few, I think, now. So there's very few that you can have an app in this and an app in that actually somebody hasn't done before. It's really, really difficult, isn't it, to find something absolutely brand new? But I encourage them, and I think it's the ones that think, yes, absolutely, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to look at the market and I'm going to test my concept or my MVP with customers. I'm going to take honest feedback and I'm going to work with it. And if I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail fast.
Very
and I'm going to do the next thing. But for me, I found the founders that have really sort of they've gone on and they have been successful have been the ones that have done that homework, done what I call the detective work, and gone out into the marketplace and spoken to potential customers and said, actually, I've come up with this idea, would you use it? And if they say no, fine, that's actually really good information, and take it on board. And they've gone to competitors and they've gone out to the marketplace and said, okay, how does the land lie at the moment? Is this a luxury product? Is it a service? Is it a physical product? What's involved in, if it's a physical product, what's involved in getting that even produced before getting it to market? So I fully believe that if you do detective work, you do exploratory work up front, it's what I call the user research work, in a way, in the competitive landscape. I'm a strategist. I'm not a designer per se. I'm a UX strategist. So it's getting each of those UX tools or the CX tools in a row and getting them done. And you have a much better chance of success, I believe, if that's done.
Very right. Very right. So there's a counter question to that. How do you go with, when you're doing user studies, do you go with the data-driven approach, or is there a scope for intuition as well? Because sometimes I work with founders where I thought that maybe the product is not going to succeed. I've talked to them because there's not, as we say, that they don't have competitors. So there is, we don't know if the idea is validated. So when but there's a sheer will in few people. They would make it successful no matter what. They'll feel about it. So sometimes people go with intuition. We have seen Apple coming out with few products where the market was not there. It was just in their intuition that we believe that we are going to use it, so others would use it. How do you place data-driven approach and intuition? Do you mix them together? Um,
Very, very rarely. I say, it's great. It's great to come with I think the intuition lies in the idea. Yeah, I have an idea, and I think I can achieve my idea with this. That's fine, and that's intuition, isn't it? It might be that I have a problem finding X product or using a particular product, and I go, oh, you know what, actually, that might be something that I could do something about. I could take to market. I could turn into, maybe it might be a hobby that has you feel, actually, this might be an opportunity for me to make some little bit of money from this, and I think at that point intuition is absolutely fine. I think intuition does have a role, absolutely. But at that point onwards, this is where the data part, that, like you say, that validation really comes into play, doesn't it? Because after we've thought, oh, this could be a really great idea, and I would really like to do this, or I like the thought of doing this as a business, going out and actually asking your target market. So number one, identifying who that target market is. And then secondly, asking them and validating that intuition. So when I'm working with startups, for example, I say to them, it's fine, come to the table with an idea and let's explore that. And then let's come up with a plan. So I recently worked with a startup who came to me who had what I think actually could be a really great idea. Now, there is a massive competitor out there, but what they're doing is they are have taken what the massive competitor is doing, and they're niching into one specific sector of the market with this offering. So there was a number of things that they'd come with that said that, we think that this sector would need this. So I said to them, right, okay, well, there's a few questions that we need to answer. Do they really need it? Would they want it? Are they willing to pay for it? Because this particular sector has been quite badly affected, particularly over the last 3 years with lockdown restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did was they said, okay, well, we'll go and find out. And they took themselves to London, and they went to a specific geographical area of London, and they asked a number of questions. And actually, yes, they did get some negative feedback, but overall, the feedback was really, really positive. And they've now come back and realized, actually, yes, that there is a market for this. We need to refine it, and we need to go out and ask again, but we've validated it before we've started spending money, because it doesn't cost anything to ask questions.
Right.
That's kind of my sort of, especially when you're bootstrapping and you're setting off and you've got very little out there. When I'm working with larger organizations and we're doing things like usability testing and we're doing surveys, yes, we generally, there's a level of compensation added at that point, because you're asking somebody for maybe an hour of their time to come and sit and use a website or use an application, for example. But at that early stage, why not? Because even at that point, that validation, that data, I've asked 10 people what they think of my idea, and 7 of them have said, yes, I would use this and I would pay in this range. 3 of them said, no, that's fine. That's still really, really important information, because what they did do is they said, why wouldn't you, or could you tell me why you might not use this particular service? So intuition, I think it's great. Let's start with the idea. At that point, we need to move over. We need to park intuition for a moment, use it kind of to keep generating the excitement around it, but go out and then validate it with quantitative and qualitative data, both, and feed it in.
That's great. Nice. You've worked with many companies. ExxonMobil is one of them. Sometimes what has been the most, if I ask you, the most challenging thing, because at times UX is highly challenging, or we need to get the results as well. Is there a story you want to share about that?
Yeah, yes, it is highly challenging. And probably the most challenging part of that is getting buy-in. It's a massive challenge. And I don't think anybody who watches this or listens to it back after the fact would disagree with me there. You know, there are numerous challenges, but that's probably the biggest one. And I think if I was to say which was the most challenging, there's probably two, if you wouldn't mind me just mentioning two, but they're kind of slightly interlinked, very, very different. One was a manufacturing organization, large global manufacturing organization. And the other one was a qualification provider, so a national qualification provider. I was working with both of those actually at a similar time. And it was interesting just how the challenges that they were both seeing were so similar. So the main challenges that I found is that generally it's rare that a CEO or a director of a large organization will come out and look for support with user experience or customer experience. It's very, very rare, because that's something that happens further down the organization, and surely there's already other people in the organization that know something about it. So why bother? So when I was brought in to work with large organizations, those two organizations, it was by middle managers. So it was by, say, for example, the customer success lead. And the other one was from, actually, at the time, a software engineer. He's now the UX manager there. And again, sort of middle managers, not senior leadership, but middle leadership, and certainly had teams underneath them, or a team. And it's quite challenging, because often your UX input, which, for example, is helping them build a UX team, or a team of what we called UX champions or UX advocates from across departments. And that's something I feel very strongly about when I go in to help an organization build a team. We take it from across the department, and we take it from hierarchical. So, you know, the people answering the phones right up to as high as leadership as we can get. So that is always a challenge, because it's very difficult to get to get the noticed by the hierarchy above that middle management. And when you're responding to a 5-year strategy for the business that has been penned by a CEO, but yet you can't, or it's really difficult to get access to them to show them what it is that UX team can do in order to help them achieve that strategy, that's really difficult, really, really difficult. So I would say that's the biggest challenge, is getting that hierarchical buy-in. Because actually, you know, UX and CX they haven't got that longevity that sales has got or marketing's got. It's quite a new concept still.
It's the most important one now.
Agree? Yes, I would agree.
If the UX, you know, design simply means that we take care of customer needs. It has to be practical, but then in a way that it's a delight for them. It's a huge delight for them, so that they would come back, and again, you know, they're hooked to what you have done, or they find it so amazing, you know, that experience to be so amazing. So it sells. I think ultimately this sells, because we worked with a company in France. They came to us. They had an amazing product for sales. It's a sales tool. Its name is Casper. So it's an amazing sales tool. And they came to us. They said, "Hey guys, you know, we have a great product, but it's not selling much." So when we looked at it, it was like very primitive designs, and you know, the experience was, you know, to find workflows and all those things was quite difficult. So we changed it completely, and you know, it took us like 4 to 5 months to like completely overhaul their back end and front end, and even the marketing website, their logo and everything. But when it came up, they saw about 400 to 500% rise in sales, and it's a SaaS product in about 5 to 6 months, and the
That's
company
incredible.
became really big. And
Mhm.
now a company in UK has bought Casper. Ultimately, it's a large company in UK which has bought them. But it went away. But at the same time, as you mentioned, that to go high up, the CEO was working with us directly, and it was a medium segment. They have like 15, 20 people, but he understood design, so he understood what design could do. So we didn't have to tell him that, "Hey, we are not designing for you, we're designing for your customers."
Mhm.
That's a more important thing. um, so yes, I mean, you must have faced the same challenge sometimes. People
Oh
would
yeah.
say, okay, maybe that's better, maybe that's better, so we have to tell them that no, it may be for you, but your people who
Oh,
are experiencing it this way.
yeah, yeah. I would say probably when I first set out on my consulting journey, that was definitely something that I talked about regularly. Oh, well, I like it like this, and I think it looks better like this, and I think this button should be this color. I mean, this is when I was kind of more on the UI and the user interface side than maybe the strategy and consulting side. And that's actually what drove me into what I do now. Well, how do you know that? Who have you asked? Who have you tested this on? And of course, the answer was nobody. And it was that intuition that we come back to, or that believing that actually, as long as it's okay for me, the customers will love it too. And as we know, that's not always the case. So yeah, that sounds really interesting. And that's a really amazing result too that you got for them.
Great, thank you. How do you go into like finding things that it's going to be long-term success versus short-term success for an experience that you're building? How do you measure that? How do you find that?
The success of what I've done, or
Yeah, what you work on, like just for example, a company came to you and said that, hey, Helena, we are having these problems with our business, and we feel that it's design problems. These are design challenges, and we want it to be changed. So sometimes we measure success through, okay, maybe this is a short-term success. We might
Mhm.
the paradigm may shift, or paradigm is shifting, and we might have to change it in 4 to 5 months, versus something which has a huge longevity, that okay, this is, if we do this, this is going to be that big. How do you make that pattern while you are working?
I think you have to be you have to be flexible. Um, so in terms of, I guess, I think it depends on the project, certainly. And I also think it depends whether you're working with a service organization or the product organization, because I think it's much more difficult for product organizations or product businesses, because they have much more upfront work to do. But in terms of success, I mean, this is where I guess in a way what I do, which is a strategist. I'm a road mapper as such. I'm not a designer, but I understand. And, I mean, when I say I'm not a designer, I mean I'm not a user interface designer. There are people out there who
Right.
do that way better than I do, but I know what we should be doing at what point in that process. And I think it's really difficult to say, because that process, depending on who you're working with and the stage that business is at and the specific problem that they've got, is it something that we could solve. And I say solve, I mean, maybe we could address maybe address might be the best term to use, not solve, because I don't think anything's ever truly solved, but addressed in 2 months. So I'm working with a client at the minute, and we're doing quite a specific user journey project. It's on one user journey, and it's a user journey that they need to absolutely get right, because if they don't, they're going to lose people. It's an app, and it's a new app, and if we don't get this absolutely right, specifically with the user base that they've got, they're going to find that the app will be downloaded and a couple of days later it'll be deleted. So that, for example, that to me would be a 2-month progression. It would be a 2-month success. And in these 2 months that we're working with it now, we're doing a series of testing. We're going into the environment, so we're doing some contextual analysis as well with this particular user group. And so that, I guess, in a way, when we come out of this 2 months, that would constitute a success because we know more about what it is that this particular user group and age group, how they use their devices, and whether they would use a device and whether they would enjoy using this particular app. So success can be, I think it depends how it's measured within an organization. So success might be to, let's say, one of the larger organizations I work with, getting a UX vision or having a group of that UX team or those advocates that I was talking about, and actually setting up a vision, and I've done this a number of times before with larger clients, is getting the right people in the room who bought in, who we know are bought into this, the idea that design and great design benefits the business. And okay, we understand that. We're going to come together now for an afternoon and we're going to think about what our vision is. What is our UX vision? What are our 10 statements? What is it that's going to drive us towards that vision? Or even a step up the UX maturity stage, for example. So I think success is, it's like this. It very much depends on what it is. A startup, for example, a 2-week going out and doing a customer survey is success to them. That's something that they achieved. Doing a competitive analysis and saying, okay, you know what, I didn't put my head in the sand and I've gone out and I've found out that yes, there are other people doing this in my market, but I've got an idea and I think I can do something a little different, a little bit better. That constitutes success. Whereas one of my clients I've worked on and off with for the last 4 years, and we're still working towards success, because what does success look like? I think it's subjective, and you know, we're still working on it.
Great take on it, Helena. One thing which you mentioned in between, and I want to reiterate that you mentioned that you're a user experience designer, you know, not actually in user interface designer. I would tell it to everyone that user experience designer is the one whose work makes user interfaces designers really valuable, because many people would make really good looking things, but if the experience is not good, it's you know, all that hard work is going down in the drain. So
yeah, and I think there's a difference here, and that some people, we kind of have to point out. I think it's really, really important. There's a difference between usability and experience. Usability, we're talking about how easy something is to use. Experience, we're talking about how enjoyable something is to use. So, I mean, let me, for example, I'll use an analogy here. So, or an example. Amazon, for example, the Amazon website, I am constantly logged into Amazon. So when I go back into Amazon, you know, it's right there. It's hello, Helena. Oh, we'll deliver to you today. It's got my name on there about 5 times. It's easy to use because we have a level of, I suppose those of us who use it quite regularly, we have a sort of a level of knowledge about how to use it. It's easy to use. Now, would I say I enjoyed using the Amazon website? Probably not. But it doesn't offer me any kind of gamification particularly, or something to think, oh, I must come back and finish doing that because that was really exciting. But it's very easy to use. And I think it's an important point to make is, I think, I mean, I'm proficient up to a level of UI, but it's that persuasion, isn't it? And I'm not talking about dark UX here. I'm talking about how can customers and users be persuaded to return? What made something a little easier for them, or what made it more enjoyable for them? And I think understanding the difference, and actually that the two have to work together, even though they're quite different, is really key.
Great. You know, you talked about gamification. You know, we constantly use it, you know, in our work. Do you use any principles of hooked? How do you hook people into it ethically? Do you have a story about that, you know, and maybe one of the product that you did?
I'm just thinking, yeah, the hook. So, I mean, I guess in the most simplest formats, we're talking about, you know, things like compelling calls to action and things like that. So, I mean, not a particular a project, I don't think, but in my work, I say I don't do any UI, I do. I kind of just tone it down because I think there's people out there who's way better than me. But yes, and I have worked on a number of projects that have been user interface projects, and one or two actually that come to mind are dashboard projects, which are really interesting. So, and that's kind of displaying the right information in the right areas of the user interface. And again, that's very much dependent on knowing what your user wants to see, isn't it? So it's validating that data, as it were. But I think the hooks, I mean, if we take it to its most basic level, then we're talking about persuading a customer or a user to do something that will help us achieve our goals as a business. And that's maybe something else that we could get onto later as well, because a lot of people are a little nervous about talking about the profit thing and the user thing together. I'm not. But it's designing for, and again, it comes back to knowing who the customer and user are. What do they want to hear? What's the tone of voice that we're going to use on an application or a website? Are we going to speak to customers in the first person, for example? So, shop, is it shop now, or is it, for example, shop my collection or shop my favorites? So I think hooks are something that should never use any dark UX patterns. We should never use any persuasive patterns to pull users and customers down a route that's going to not benefit them and us. And they have to be honest, but they have to be compelling. And there has to be also a level of affordance in those CTAs. So there has to be something that changes as a user hovers over or clicks on a particular hook. But I do think language is a large part of that and forms a large part. And that's when we come into the content design part of UX, isn't it? And it's understanding the copy. But then, again, like I said just a few moments ago, it's all about coming back. What does the customer and user want? Who are they? And what's the tone of voice that they want to hear from you? And using that sparingly, but impactfully in that experience.
Right. Do you think dark force or dark UX is much stronger, Instagram Reels, than putting something highly positive? Depending on the product.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I think so. I don't do dark UX. I don't know an awful lot about it, but yeah, I think it can be, but then it just ends up in frustration, doesn't it? It ends up in frustration for the user and the customer, and then we know what the end result of that is. So, I mean, there's a few companies, e-commerce companies, very large ones, who I won't name any names, that have been, you go onto their websites. And you can see straight away there's things like, for example, countdown timers, and the sale's going to end at this point, and you'll only get I don't know. And I just think, but we know that timer starts again at the end of
only one product left, only one left.
Exactly.
5 people are viewing this at this time, 20 people are viewing this product at this time.
Yes,
all
exactly.
those things.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? Actually, there are some that is a good way of using. It's that fear of missing out, isn't it? That FOMO.
Yeah.
And I can see exactly why it's happening, and I'm not sure if that is wholly dark UX. To be perfectly honest, it might genuinely be the case that if I want a particular product by the end of today, there is only one available to me. If I'm willing to wait till tomorrow, for example, I maybe have 15, and that's fine. But if there is, I mean, actually, this happened to me yesterday, because we're staying with my daughter in Manchester at the moment, and we realised we didn't have an ironing board, and so I had to get an ironing board and an iron delivered by the end of yesterday, so my husband could iron his shed. And there was actually one left that could be delivered last night, or I would have had to wait till 9 o'clock this morning, which was too late. So it worked, didn't it? But it did solve my problem. So if it solves my problem as a customer, is it necessarily a bad thing?
Great. You mentioned dashboards.
Yes.
We have worked on a dashboard which might be of high interest to you. It's like cockpit. You understand all the data. I'll share it with you after the call.
Oh yeah, that would be
Uh,
great to see that.
I'll ask my team to like send that, and I'll share that with you after the call. You'll enjoy it because it solves amazing user experience, and the UI is very nice. When you understand that the needle moves. Okay, these are the
Mhm.
metrics that have come up. It's quite nice. I think it fits with you. We'll share it with you. You can use it
Oh, I'd love to see that.
as well.
That'd
Great.
be
So, one very important question I forgot to ask you, which is how did you find your passion? How did you come into design, and what's the story behind? When did you thought that, okay, this is something I'm gonna do all my life?
Oh, goodness. Well, of course, I didn't start out doing this in my profession, actually. I don't know if you saw you said you'd read my CV earlier. So it might not come as a surprise to you that I do have a creative background. So just to cut a long story short, I am a classically trained musician. My degree is in music, which I got way, way back 30 years ago. And I was a teacher for the first 6 or 7 years of my professional life. At that point, we were traveling around quite a lot with my husband's job, and I took some time out and had my daughters. And it was after that I realised I was not, under any circumstances, going to return to secondary school teaching. It wasn't the teaching bit. I absolutely adored the teaching bit, the imparting of information. What I didn't enjoy was the bureaucracy, the management, it was tough. It was a really tough environment and quite a toxic environment to be in, actually. So when I've always been a hard worker, and I didn't enjoy not working. And eventually what I decided to do is my husband and I actually set up a web business. So I guess when I talk about not doing UI design, I maybe do put myself down a little bit, because we actually started off as a web development design company. And that was actually the point, not long after I started that the UX part started to creep in. And I've said beforehand about how I'd worked with some clients, and they'd say, well, I want this like this, and I think the website should look like this, and I think the button, and that's where this light bulb, I'll come in and say, but wait a minute, how do you know that the button should be this color, or we should lay out the page in such a way, or this should be the information architecture? And of course, well, it's just what I like. And that was the point then where I would start doing some of the quite basic UX processes. So, well, I thought, well, do you know somebody who might buy this? Or not friends and family. I'm not never say ask friends and family, because they'll always give you the wrong answer, which is yes, it's wonderful. But let's go and find some people who might be your target audience, and let's ask them what they think. Now, at this point, so this is nigh on 12, 13 years ago, I didn't realize that this was user experience design. It was, for me, it was a case of validating what these very early clients thought was the best thing to do, or what was the right thing to do. And that's when it all really started for me. It was this, I guess I'm quite nosy, and I wanted to ask questions of people. And I guess at the time it was something that, oh, we've never been asked those questions before. Oh, we just wanted a website, so why don't you just build the website? Or we went to another website developer, and they just built it and said, here you go. And it wasn't that long after that, and I started, actually, I'm really enjoying this kind of discovery part, this understanding why we should have something look the way it does or behave the way it does. And oh, this is something called UX. And that's really where it all started. So for a number of years, I continued in that sort of the website and the design and the UX process running together. But then in the Northeast where I am, I started to sort of, I guess in a way, have become known as somebody who knew something about UX, and at that time that was still a really new concept, so new in fact that I was sometimes in networking meetings, I was asked if I had something to do with radiography and X-rays. I mean, that's how
Wow.
that's how new the concept was. That happens very rarely these days. Many more people know what the term UX means, but when you're going back 6 to 8 years, 9 years ago, it was a really quite a new concept, and it's taken hard graft, Sanchit. It really has, to get to a point for me going from this very, very early doors into UX and building that expertise throughout the last, what would be nearly a decade now, and now being part of that, which is now a huge and growing experience design community. I don't think we can call it just UX anymore, actually, because it's not. So my background really is, yes, I was a creative, but a very different type of creative. But the creativity has stayed with me, and the mentoring that I do, and I do a lot of presentations and speaking about experience design, having that teaching background has been absolutely invaluable. It really has.
And you're in a great industry now. I feel that design is the most innovative, especially experience design. With the, we have something in our hands that we can change a lot of things. We can improvise on a lot of things, and it's always improvising. With the advent of new tools, maybe you checked how design tools are coming up. We have, the designers have more power in their hands because they are going to work with variables now. And now, Figma came out with like variables and all. And I think ultimately where it is going is that you'll just click on your design and it would convert into a code, front-end code, and you can like match things properly. So design is amazing time to be design.
Yeah, we're starting to sort of move into the world of, like you say, tools such as Figma, Adobe XD, for example, for design. And we're starting now, there's a lot of talk, isn't there, about AI. And, that's I guess in a way, a whole different subject. But, you can take you can ask ChatGPT, for example, to write some code for something that would look like X and have this. It's incredible. And I know there's a lot of talk about AI taking over the world and putting people out of jobs, but there's one thing that AI doesn't have, and that's experience. It doesn't have experience. It doesn't have knowledge in the way that people and humans have knowledge. It doesn't have those intricacies that we do as designers and strategists. But it's a really exciting time. I'm excited by it. I'm not afraid of it at all, but I'm really excited about how it can help. So we've come through this. We're kind of moving forward, aren't we, through these different tools that we've got at our disposal.
Exactly. My take on AI is that it would help us to do even more creative work. It would take a bit of redundant work that we do, and ChatGPT is a prime example of design done well. When you type a command, it seems that a human is typing or it is thinking, while it already knows the answer. If any developer have made it without user experience designer, they would have just simply copied pasted and put everything in front of ASAP. But it comes out like somebody's typing it quite quickly. So it's a prime example of
thinking, doesn't it? Like you said there, you get that positive feedback from it. Actually, I'm thinking about this, and I'm going to return something to you in the form of text. Obviously, it's very clever, very simple.
That's UX done really well. So
it is.
Yeah. Helena, I have a few questions from you, from the team. From a few members of our team, they asked a few questions. So I'll ask those out from you, and you can give your best take on it. So shall we begin?
I will try my best.
So Garima is our senior product designer here. She has asked, couple of questions like, what methodologies and tools do you use to gather user insights and do research? How do you use different tools, or which methodologies you use to conduct the research?
Yeah, so for research, I mean, there's various tools that I draw from, certainly, and it depends what kind of data that we're wanting to collect. So if we're wanting to collect some user or customer feedback, for example, so the qualitative data, user surveys. If we're in a larger, maybe longer term project, diaries are a really great way of collecting qualitative data. So diaries are something that I would use over a period of 2 to 3 weeks, for example. So every time a user uses a digital asset or uses a physical product, tell us a little bit about what time of day they're using it, how they feel as they're using it, what were they wanting to achieve from using it at that particular point. So that's a really great way of getting a longer term view of how a user is using something. Surveys are really, really great. And for a really good mix of qualitative and quantitative data, I really love doing the usability tests. So done quite a lot of these recently, one for a company in the finance sector, and one for a government owned institution. And that is, a series of 1 hour sessions, say 5 to 6 over the case of over the space of a day. Pre-written tasks, so asking a user, how would you move from the home page to this particular page, or show me how you might complete this task. And if possible, I like to ask users to commentate as they're moving through a task. So that gives us an idea of how easy they're finding it to use, or if there are any points of frustration. And then following that, one of my favorite data points is the system usability scale. So after we've finished collecting qualitative data and observing the user use something, we ask them a set of 10 questions. So they're actually not questions, they're statements about their ease of use. And that gives our clients a really great benchmark. And it gives us a benchmark, can be a benchmark as to where we should be getting to. So if we get a score of, say, 40 on a system usability scale, that's low, and we should be aiming for 75 or 80 and above. So we can make changes based on what we've got, and then test again in 2 to 3 months' time, whatever the sort of the agile cycle is that we're working with. So there's a number of methodologies that I use, and those are just some of them, for example.
Great, thank you. Another is, how do you balance user needs and business objectives during the design thinking process?
Right. Well, I was hoping I might get a question like this. I'm very much of the view that companies do not want to make user experiences and customer experiences better just because they want to be nice. There's a reason why I am approached to help an organization make the user and customer experiences better. And it's generally because they have a target, or they want to improve their bottom line, or they want to increase their profit by 12% next year, or whatever it is. And I am a firm believer that we have to understand what the business objectives and goals are before we start on a user experience design project. So certainly the larger organizations, I've been asked to come in as a UX consultant. I have to be able to do my job properly, I have to have a period of immersion in that company, in that business, because I need to understand what is it that they want to achieve from this project. Let's just park the user and customer for a second. They're very important because they're the ones who keep us in business. But what is it that you actually want? And I think that's what makes me a little bit different in that respect, is that I do understand there is a business need for user and customer experience. Right. And I think when you put those two together, the needs of the business as well as the needs of the customer, the user, that's where we get the best results.
Great. That's great insight. Thank you. A follow-up question on it is, how do you measure success of your work? The KPIs. How do you measure that? Revenues or something else?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, it's kind of that return on investment, isn't it? And this comes back to getting buy-in as early as you can in the process. So we talked a little bit about what success looked like beforehand, and I think we can kind of channel that in a little bit, in a way. But in terms of KPIs, has the customer satisfaction score gone up, for example? What is the project? Is the project about making it quicker and more efficient for a user to complete their task? So are we measuring? That's when we would look at, for example, like a Google Analytics. And I'm very lucky, as part of my work at Cohesis, where I'm interim UX lead at the minute, we have a fabulous member of the team who understands what's going on back there really, really well. So there might be specific KPIs and metrics which are quantitative based, and let's say, for example, we want a user to spend more time on a particular page, but we want the whole journey to be quicker, or we want more users to complete an application form. So it might be that today we know that out of every 100 users, only 3 are completing an application form. So we know we've got a problem. So that gives us a benchmark metric. And then, of course, we can come back again after we've made some improvements to that form, those user validated improvements, and understand, okay, we've gone from 3 to, say, 63. So that represents success. It represents, a KPI. But also, I think, there's various metrics I use: customer satisfaction, customer effort score, so how much effort does a customer have to put in to complete the task, system usability scale. And then a lot of companies, it's just a case of, well, we want our NPS, our net promoter score, to go up, or we want it to be 2 or 3 points higher over the next 6 to 12 months. NPS, it's a good kind of umbrella measurement, but it's best used with other KPIs. So it's really difficult to say. The KPIs are very specific to the project, and some of them are profit and revenue driven. Some of them are the fact, actually, we've now got a UX team set up. That's success, which we didn't have beforehand. But then obviously there are KPI specifics and those benchmarks. So I'm working on a really great project at the minute with an educational institution, and those quite specific UX KPIs, such as some of those I've just talked about, are going to be key for the success of that project.
Right, amazing. Next question is by Nabajit. He says that the world is really fast-paced now, and at the same time, technology and user expectations, they constantly evolve. How do you stay updated with the latest happenings, and how do you adapt to ensure that your ideas are steps ahead of the pace? How do you do that?
It's hard, especially when you're working full time anyway and you're busy, but it's something that we have to do. We absolutely have to do. And the questioner there is absolutely right. The world is moving extremely fast at the minute. I mean, a year ago, how many of us had heard of ChatGPT or were even really thinking about AI? And now it's everywhere. And I've started using it because I believe I can only really know about something and understand something and how I can use it in my world of UX strategy if I understand what it does and what the benefits are of using it. So one of the things that I do is start wherever I can using these tools, just after work, it's sort of even in the evening, what can this do? Or how might this benefit my industry or the clients that I'm working with? So it's really a case of keeping on top of what is going on to the best of your ability. It's impossible to keep on top of everything, but if I can start thinking about how can I use, there's things like Mid-Journey as well. I don't know if Mid-Journey, the graphic, the image sort of AI tool. That's a really interesting one as well.
Do you use it in your work?
Well, I haven't used it in my work yet, but I can see some opportunities to use it. Absolutely. I
Right,
think I think it would be really exciting for e-commerce. Definitely.
right,
Well, I think there's
right.
a lot of opportunity there for e-commerce and creating images. I think it would be absolutely fascinating. So I've set up a Discord account so I could have a play around with Midjourney, you know. So it's keeping on top of these kind of tools and using Figma, you know, for example, Figma, I use Figma when I'm using sort of, you know, for UI type stuff. And they're always adding updates and, you know, new features. And in my mentoring, when I'm mentoring people who are coming into UX, because that's something that I haven't talked about really today, but I do also do a lot of training for people who are wanting to come into the UX profession. I need to know how to do the latest thing to be able to show them how to do it. So there's a lot of work in keeping up with the world at the moment, I would say, but and I do
Great,
my best.
great. Yeah, I was going to ask you this question: that do you use AI? Do you use Midjourney? But you mentioned that you're going to use
Yeah,
it. Yeah, I think it solves some you know the time problems. You know, maybe if you know you're making a paper or something, you can use it ASAP.
I think so. I mean, I'll give you an example of where I used ChatGPT actually recently, and it was really useful. And it was a time saver. It wasn't to replace something. I was doing a workshop, and it was about personas and understanding who the customer is and the user is. And I wanted just to come up with, I think it was a young guy in his 30s who needed a new pair of running trainers. And I gave it a number of prompts that I wanted to use. And there we go. It came up with, you know, the name and the age and where they lived and the type of places they might shop already, whether they just shopped online, whether they didn't, what their favorite brand of trainer might be. And so what I did is I took the framework, I took the outline of that, and then I love Canva. I'm a really big advocate of Canva. And I took it and I made it into the actual kind of a persona out template or framework. And it just took away that, oh right, okay, it just saved me time. It was brilliant. I loved doing it. And so it didn't replace me. I gave it the prompts. I knew what I wanted, but then it kind of filled in the gaps for me. And I had to do some editing, yes, and I had to change a few bits, yes. But for the main part, it was great and saved me about an hour and a half.
Yeah, we could use it in UX writing as well.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
okay. One question is from Pratiksha. What about sometimes when, you know, there are times when we have worked on the product with all our best, but somehow it doesn't succeed. How do you how do you cope up with that? You know, what if it doesn't perform the way we wanted it to be? Uh,
So basically, when a project doesn't quite go the way that we want it to go, yeah, and
right.
it happens.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely
It
happens.
happens.
And how do you deal with that? You know, UX is a very subjective thing, and sometimes, no matter how much we plan and how much I strategize and how good a team is that you're working with, yeah, sometimes things don't go to plan, and there's a number of reasons for that. It might be that resource is a challenge, and that's probably the most common problem I've come across. Or it might be that you know, we aren't able, due to constraints, to be able to do what we really know we have to do to succeed in a project. It might be that a project is cut short for whatever reason, and we have to do the minimum we can, but to be able to, say, prove or validate a design. So there are a number of reasons that projects don't go to plan or don't go well. And I guess in a way, it's a case of being flexible or understanding that, you know, this time it hasn't quite worked for us for whatever reason. There's an example I could probably draw on, and that happened
Mhm.
fairly recently, and that was when we'd done a set of usability tests, and the client didn't really think they'd got what they needed out of those usability tests. So I think our team really felt that we had, and I think that the reason, and again, this comes back to education about UX, I think it was because 2 or 3 of the 6, the users that the recruitment firm had recruited weren't maybe quite the target market that this client were wanting to get to. And so I think it's in that kind of case, what we did was as well, actually, we drew the insights that we could from those user testers. And actually what we found was, even though they weren't exactly the type of user that we probably would have recruited ourselves, we did gain an awful lot of knowledge about who it was that we didn't want as customers. So we were kind of able to sort of pivot a little bit and sort of turn it around. But yeah, there are times when it doesn't go to plan, and as I say, it's for a number of reasons. The best way I've found of keeping things to plan as much as possible is communication. It's keeping in contact with the client regularly and consistently, saying, this is what we're doing, are you happy with this? So for example, if we're doing a run of usability tests, sending them the tasks, talking them through the tasks beforehand, agreeing with them what we're going to ask and why we're asking those questions. Because let's say, for example, I talked about the system usability scale. Most clients don't know what that is or what it means for them in terms of it giving them a benchmark around ease of use. So speaking their language and communicating effectively and consistently really increases the chance of a project success.
Great. That's quite insightful. Thank you. One maybe last question: that do you do mentorship because of your teaching experience and then coming into design? If you do mentorship, we can ask people where to contact you and all.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yes, I am a mentor. So there's 2 hats that I wear there, Sanchit. So I train people and mentor people who want to, who either want to enter the UX profession and want to understand what's involved and how maybe they should get themselves ready for work. But also I mentor current UXers. So one of my mentors at the moment actually is a UX manager and has in a manufacturing company, for example. So I work with them and they know that they can contact me, and we have an arrangement where they can reach out to me just to sort of, share ideas, somebody else to sort of talk to about maybe the challenges, because it is challenging. It's a challenging space. We're still fairly early days in experience design, as we said right at the top of the call today. So it can be, and it's just giving people a voice and somebody to sort of say, hey, what do you think? And often it's a little bit like when I do website auditing. That's one of my favorite things to do as well. It's sometimes having somebody come in from the outside and just looking in and saying, have you seen that? And often when you're in something all the time, or when you're looking at something all the time, you don't see, or it's difficult to see where those challenges lie. So yeah, that's my role as a mentor and trainer. So, and I love that. It's great.
That's great. People would love to mentor, from you, and we'll share your LinkedIn ID and all.
Yes.
You mentioned website auditing as well. I might take your help. We're building a new website. I might ask you to give a look about it. It would be great to hear from you.
I have to warn you, I am brutal.
I would exactly love that, because I'm brutal as well. Okay. So
as long as you don't mind that, it's funny, the work I do at Northumbria University, which is a lot of startups and scale-ups, and one of the people I work with, he's a business advisor, a general business advisor, and he sets up meetings between myself and a graduate, for example, who's running a business. And he always, in his email introduction, he always gives them a health warning and says, as long as you're not too protective, because yeah, I'll set you up with a meeting with Helena, but just be warned, she will tell you. And I am brutal. But the way I look at it, I'm being kind too, because you're better off having these things fixed and right from now, right from the get-go, than wondering in 6 months' time why it isn't working for you. But if you don't mind brutal, then
yeah, we're in a serious, very, very serious business. So we don't want to hear just kind words. We want to hear, what exactly a person thinks. So you don't work with smart people to hear kind words. So yeah, Helena, it has been great talking to you, and thank you very much for doing this. And really great to hear your journey and great insights that we got, and lots of people would get that as well. Thank you very, very much. I'll be in touch with you. Right.
Lovely. Thanks so much, John. It's been an absolute pleasure. It really has, and thank you, and excellent questions as well from the team. So thank you to them too.
Great. I'll foresee them. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Helena. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.